Okay, awesome. Let's get started. So, everybody, you are very welcome to this webinar today. It's a webinar on URL analysis and phishing automation with Box, URLscan, and Tines. We're hopefully in for a fun time this afternoon. We've got some great folks that I've had the pleasure of working with over the last few years joining. So, hopefully, we'll learn a lot and have a little bit of fun at the same time. We get all the questions that you ask in a really nice dashboard that we've got going. So if you want to ask a question, please go ahead and ask. I think this is broadcast live on LinkedIn, and we should be able to answer. But to get started, I think there's a few different things that we can do. Our rough agenda today is we're going to give a quick introduction to Box, URLscan, and Tines, just to baseline everybody's understanding of what we're going to be talking about. Johannes is going to give a quick overview of URLscan and what it does, and then we'll dive into some demos. So we'll dive into one or two stories around the analysis of suspicious emails, so emails reported to an abuse inbox. And then we'll give another demo of detecting malicious files that are hosted on platforms and how you can automate that process. And then we'll finish up by talking about some plans for Box, URLscan, and Tines, and what we've got in store for the future. So hopefully we'll have a good time. So yeah, you're very welcome. I think that I'd love to start by giving a quick introduction to the folks on the webinar. So Del, do you want to introduce yourself?
Of course, yeah. Glad to be here with you folks today. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Del Nakos. I'm supporting the security and incident response team for Box in the UK. I've been a security analyst before. I worked for Rackspace. And I'm heavily working on security automation and Tines.
Nice. Thanks for the early plug. Johannes, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Johannes. Welcome to this webinar. I'm glad you made it out, even with everything going on. I'm sorry, there's a little bit of construction. I'm the founder and CEO of URLscan. I used to be the manager of the threat intelligence automation team at CrowdStrike. And we had fun facts on here, so I added mine back in. I'm German, so I had a really tough time coming up with a fun fact, and that's about it.
Nice, thanks. And I'm Thomas. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tines. I run the customer success team at Tines at the moment. I ran security operations in DocuSign for a couple of years. I was also responsible for the technical investigations team in eBay and PayPal when we were the number 2 and number 1 fish brands in the world. So I have a ton of experience in this area, but love what Johannes is doing, obviously what Del is doing in the area, and obviously built Tines to help solve some of the problems that I had when I was in those areas. My fun fact was going to be that I really secretly want to be a historian if everything works out in Tines, but we'll leave that aside and we'll talk about that another time maybe. So I think the best place to start here, Del, we're going to be relying on you a lot during this to be the expert on what good process should look like. We can tell you, hey, this is what we think it should look like, but you're actually on the front line. You're spending time doing this every single day. Do you want to talk about what your job is in Box and some of the challenges you're facing?
Yeah, of course. So a few words about Box. Box is a content cloud, is a single platform that empowering organizations to manage their entire content lifecycle, work securely from anywhere, and integrate across best-of-breed apps. You see that the security that works securely is in there, and that's our mission as a security incident response team at Box, to make sure that Boxers and customers are using our platform securely. So our team is in a mature level. I would say that we are dealing with all kind of attacks currently, from phishing emails, from malware, platform abuse, and all that aspects. We have a security automation team that supports our incident response process. And and currently we are building upon a strategy on threat-informed defense.
Nice, awesome. How big is the team?
It's around 20 people in total.
Brilliant. And what are some of the threats you see, or what are some of the stuff that you folks do every single day?
Of course, phishing emails are taking most of our time. We're also dealing with very many abuse attempts on our platform. I mean, you know, one of the main parts of our platform is sharing files with others, and that came to the attention of people with not the best intents out there. So this is, I would say that this is the majority of things that we're dealing with.
Nice, awesome. Thanks for sharing, Del. So, Johannes, it sounds like Del and a whole lot of other people are basically dealing with the process of, I suppose, phishing and analyzing URLs day in, day out. Do you want to talk about how you how you came to start URLscan and tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. URLscan was started as kind of a scratch your own itch project. So I often had the problem that I wanted to investigate a website, and what do you do, right? You fire up Chrome, you browse to the website, and then you try to investigate all the different things happening under the hood, right? What are the requests being made? Where's JavaScript being downloaded from? And then once you have that information, you got to go 3 levels deep and figure out, okay, which IP address is this hostname pointing to? Which network does this IP address belong to? Are there any other interesting things on that IP address, right? And that process was very cumbersome. And so I created URLscan a while ago to solve that, right? To have a very simple way of putting in a website, putting in a suspicious URL, and then getting everything that you might be interested in at your fingertips, ready to analyze. So we describe URLscan as a sandbox for websites, because it's very easy to grasp for people who have worked with the malware sandbox. The malware sandbox gives you all kinds of information and artifacts about a file, which files were written, what processes were executed. And we try to do the same thing just for websites. And what that means is we try to capture. So first of all, we try to capture as much information as possible during the website analysis, without necessarily knowing which piece of information is going to be crucial for that specific customer or for that specific investigation. So we want to be as generic as possible, capture everything, meaning a screenshot, a DOM snapshot, the individual HTTP interactions. We annotate things like the IP addresses with GeoIP and with the ASN names they belong to, because there's really different use cases for capturing that information. And then once we've captured everything, we distill it down to this result view, which is what we're seeing in the background, and then show it back to the user, again, without knowing what exactly the user might be interested in. And in fact, the user might not even know himself what he's interested in, because there might be something really interesting in the screenshot, or the screenshot might be empty, but it might be more interesting to look at what other host names were contacted. So that's the reason that URLscan was created. Today, it's a huge community platform, I would say. There's tens of thousands of people using it every day to analyze websites, a lot of them suspicious or malicious. And they can not just use the platform to analyze their own websites, which is great in itself, but they can actually tap into all the data and into all the historical data that we have from all the other submissions to get context, because that's the second aspect of it. Is it's helpful to look at one analysis and see what the screenshot looks like and which servers were contacted. But in most cases, the second question you have is usually, okay, but what is this IP? Is it something that's legitimate? Is it something that's only seen on legitimate websites? Or is it something that's predominantly connected to other malicious websites? And so that context is what makes URLscan as valuable as it is today to the community and to our customers. I hope that serves as an introduction. I think most people have at the very least come across URLscan as part of an investigation at some point.
If they haven't, then today's one of their it's their lucky day, one of the lucky 10,000. It's I can say comfortably it's one of my favorite websites on the net. I've used it in like hundreds of investigations, and we recommend it to pretty much all of our customers at times as an incredibly powerful and robust platform. And I know we've got a ton of joint customers as well, like Dell. So I think we'll give a little bit of a demo of URLscan in a minute or two. But I think what we wanted to talk about today was just one of the use cases. I think that I suppose is like URLscan is used for a lot, and that's like the analysis of phishing emails. So what we might talk about is like the process, maybe manually, of analyzing phishing emails before there was an automation platform like Tines, and before maybe not before URLscan existed. But Del, do you want to maybe talk about that process of like how you would go about analyzing a phishing email, and then we can dive in and maybe see what it looks like if you were to throw a URL into URLscan, and then see what it looks like if you were to automate that process.
Yeah, of course. So if you have to do that manually, you take the phishing email and you start deconstructing that to their main components, of those being from the sender of the email. Then you want to look at the body of the email, look for any suspicious, for any URLs that are there or links. Then you have the attachments, if any, to the email. And last but not least, you need to check the headers to look who the actual sender of the email is and if it was a spoofing attempt or impersonation. So once you do that process and gather your potential IOCs, I would call them, then you need to run them through external resources to gather information about them. That would take you to, if we're talking about the URL, to a site like URLscan. You want to submit the URL there, wait for the results, fetch the results, put them back into the ticket or let's say the notepad that you're gathering your investigation information, investigation findings, and then move to maybe to another resource if you want to have multiple resources of information for each IOC. Then you need to follow the same process for attachments. You need to throw them in a sandbox, wait for the analysis to end, grab the report, put it back in the ticket. Then same thing for the sender, check the sender email address to an external service provider.
So what you're telling me is it's an extremely long and like a long process in order to a really difficult task. So I think like the focus that we're going to look at today, we'll look at all of that, but the focus that we're going to look at today is that process of like analyzing those URLs. It might help. Johannes, do you want to show quickly like URLscan and just what that process looks like when you're analyzing a URL, and then maybe we can look at the next step of like reading an email and analyzing it, and then keep on going all the way until we get to what Del was talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. We should switch to my shared screen, and then we can look at the URLscan.
Sweet.
There we go. Okay, so I assume most people have seen that, but again, it's very simple to use. This is the front page of URLscan where you can see the recent scans done by the community. And if you get a URL, a website that you want to analyze, you can just go here, put in the URL. So let's use Times as an example. There's some options that you can choose, but you don't really have to in most cases. So you could choose where you want to scan the website from if you suspect the website is limited to a specific geographical region, for example. But let's just fire it off. Let's try to look at Times. So now URLscan is analyzing the website, which really just means that there's a Chrome web browser going to the website in the background. It's recording all the interactions. It's waiting for the page to finish loading. And for legitimate pages, it often works pretty quickly, like in this case. And then URLscan shows us the result of that one scan. And then again, this is where we have all this wealth of information that we have in the background, that we have in our database. And this result page is a pretty rendering of that information. So there's high-level information like what is the IP address where the page is hosted, what's the submitted URL as well as the effective URL, if there was a redirect from one URL to another URL, for example. We get high-level information about the network that the IP belongs to, the main IP. We can see the screenshot here in full resolution if we wanted to. And so, again, all of that information is available in this result page, which is just a pretty rendering because all of that information is also available through the API. So you can use a tool like Times to pull down this result and then just check the fields in the API output that are relevant to your investigation, right? You could just check, was the page redirected to another URL? Or is there a verdict from URLscan? Because we actually have verdicts too, where we try to identify phishing, brand impersonation against specific brands. And if we do, we would say this is targeting, I don't know, PayPal or Microsoft or whatever here in our own verdict. So yeah, that is kind of the very straightforward submission to retrieval workflow. Obviously, there's more APIs that you could work with also as part of your automation playbook with Tines. There's a search API that you can interface with as well, but this should, I think, suffice for the straightforward use case.
Awesome, thank you. And we have our first comment in here. I think you should be able to see it. So from Chris, URLscan is an invaluable tool for cybersecurity analysts and incident response. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing, Chris, and thanks for the plug. So yeah, folks, just to say, if you have any more questions, you can put them in the chat, and we'll be able to see them, and we'll put up some on screen. Oh, also, somebody's asked, will the recording and slides be available post session? Yes, they will. We'll host them on Tines.com at least, and we'll share that link out. So I think the next step, if we want to switch over to my screen again, I think the next step is to talk about how this process could be automated. So what I'll do at the very start is I'll show just an example of like what people think when they think of analyzing a URL and analyzing an email reported to an abuse inbox, what that process might look like. So I think if we switch over to my screen, I should have a simple phishing story that's ready to go. So this is a very, very simple phishing story. So by the way, sorry, this is Tines. Tines is an automation platform. It allows analysts and engineers to automate any repetitive manual process. The way it works is you build using these actions over here. They're building blocks. And using one of these actions, you're going to be able to automate pretty much any step in a security process, or pretty much any process out there. Very, very simple. Drag, drop, and connect. So if you want to, for example, reply to an email that you've just read, just drag on an email action, connect it up, and then you'll be able to build. So instead of Thomas@Tines.io, I can find the sender from this email. This is going to be in an event. So this email was sent from Alice@Tines.xyz. I'm going to copy this path here. And then if I want to reply to that sender, or whoever that sender is always going to be, I'm just going to paste that in there. And now the recipient's this email is always going to send a reply to the sender. But anyway, what I did this morning is I looked at a few different phishing emails that I received recently, and then I edited one or two. So this morning I sent an email. Let me see if I can show it up here. Actually, I'll start at the very bottom. This morning I sent an email that was, let's read it. It was about chase phishing. So somebody, or Alice, reported to us that they received a link to this website, Pro365 Consulting. And in Tines, what we've done is we've just set up an abuse inbox here that anybody can report an email into. In this case, it's webinar@Tines.xyz, but I'll be using report phishing, and then I'll also show you how you can do this yourself if you want, very, very easily. So what we're doing here is that suspicious email, it just had it was related to chase phishing. It had a link, and what I did was I extracted the URL. So I used this event transformation action to extract the URLs. I took each of the URLs and I submitted them privately to URLscan. So as Johannes mentioned, URLscan has an incredible API. So in Tines, when you are connecting to an API, you're just connecting to that API directly. We've got a whole load of templates over here. So I can show you how to submit. So if I want to submit a URL to URLscan, I can search for submit a URL to URLscan privately, drag it on and connect. And you'll see that's all I've done is, drag that on and change the parameter of what I'm sending. But here I've submitted it, and then I've simply retrieved the result over here. And if I look at the URL, the result from submitting to URLscan, what you'll see is, well, first of all, when I submitted, let me show you here. Submission was successful, and it sent me a link to the actual page, which I can view in URLscan. So let's view that here. And you can see here, this is like chase phishing. When you submit, you do have to wait a second to get the result. So what I did was I delayed the event, and then I retrieved the result. So I just delayed by 10 or 15 seconds, and then I've actually retried until it's gotten, or till the result is available. But when I retrieve the result, we can see that in URLscan, it's been marked as, actually, I'll go to verdicts. Overall, malicious is true, has verdicts is true. I've got my brands is chase. And as Johannes kind of mentioned earlier, there's actually a ton of really, really useful information here. So you can see some of the information about the server. You can see, I suppose a ton of information about all the domains and all the IPs that it's connected to, et cetera, the engines that said it was malicious or not. So really, really useful information. And then when it's malicious, I've responded to the sender, and I've just said something along the lines of the URL hosted at that URL. I've defanged it so that you don't actually send a malicious URL back to the person. I said it's malicious, and then I've said actually I've got an if statement here. If the verdict is malicious, say it was malicious. Otherwise, say it's benign. And if I look at my response here, I should have something very, very simple like this, just saying, hi, thank you for reporting the email. Like as you said, it was malicious, basically. Nothing too crazy there. Actually, let me bring this over here so that I can reference it later. So that's like a very simple phishing process. But in reality, there's a whole load. This is like pretty easy to build. But in reality, there's a whole load of challenges with this. So, for example, we haven't like had a situation where there could be multiple URLs. We haven't had a situation where you want to like check if a URL is actually known good, like box.com. You don't want to scan. You may not want to scan links to box.com. You may have a challenge with getting rate limited or something like that, or if there's an error. So in reality, in Tines, you can build out a really, really rich story. This is a reasonably basic story, but you can build out a really rich story. And that's kind of what I'll show next is a little bit of a richer story. So this is again still not a full story, but this is actually a story that we use for a lot of our customers. So if you want to try this out, you can send a mail right now to scan@phish.ly. And if you send a mail to scan@phish.ly, immediately or within a couple of minutes, a response will come back, which will say whether or not that URL or the URLs in the mail were malicious. So it's worth giving that a try if you want. What this is doing is it has a few more steps. So the first step is it's reading an email again, which is perfect. The next thing it's doing is it's checking for the URLs or checking if there are URLs. The reason for that is that we probably want to reply if there's no URLs rather than just, stop. So if there's no URLs, we'll return the results and we'll reply. If there are URLs, we'll extract them and then we'll explode them. So we'll take every single URL and we'll analyze it. We also have a few processes that we can do with URLscan. So we don't just want to, for example, submit directly to URLscan and check if it's good. We want to we'll have an entire process. This is called a sub-story in Tines. So in Tines, these workflows are called stories. But this is a sub-story where we're actually checking if the domain's on a known good list. We're making sure that it was submitted successfully. And then we're also looping just in case like something goes wrong and the verdict is never returned. But ultimately, we're just retrieving the result and returning the result here. So it's a very similar process, submitting and retrieving the result, but we're just building in some nice error handling. And when we do that, we then, after we explode and we submit all the URLs to URLscan, we're imploding. Kind of a complicated concept here. So if you've got if you've got an email and you've got 10 URLs in there, you kind of want to check if any are malicious or none are malicious. So you explode those 10, you check them in URLscan, and then you implode them all back together. And that's all we're doing here. But what happens here at the end then is we get a much richer verdict, and we're able to get a much more robust process, and we're able to get a much better response. So I'll show you what the response here looks like. So this is the reply to the reporter here. It's the exact same mail, but I'm actually able to include some really nice data. This is obviously just HTML as well. So Tines, brought to you by Tines and URLscan. I'm saying that this is malicious. I've got some nice advertising here. And then I'm also saying, here's some link analysis results. So I'm saying here, like scanned URL is the URL, the verdict is malicious, the report URL, and I've got a link so the person can view what it was, which is brilliant. So they can actually see the screenshot. You've got the screenshot if they want. So that's actually just a direct link to the screenshot. We're saying, so again, this is all from URLscan. The page type is phishing. And then we're also including the brand targeted chase. This is a question from Wellington who's saying, how can we track or query only a specific brand on URLscan, e.g. targeting this brand's field? We'll touch on that a little bit later. That's a question that you can do in the I think in the Pro API, or sorry, in the Pro version of URLscan, where you can actually hunt for specific brands and search for specific brands and track all those, which is really, really useful. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. But here what we've done is we've just pulled out from the URLscan results the brand that was targeted, which is really cool. So I'm going to stop there for 1 second. I may ask, so Del, just to kind of remind, so there's like, this is still like, this looks like a really robust process, but there's still those other things that you want to do, right? So there's still like, what are some of the other things that you might want to do as opposed to just analyze those URLs? I know you talked about some of them earlier.
Yeah, of course. So I would describe the thing that you demonstrated as a branch out of
Yeah.
production story, with that would handle the URLs, and maybe you can add a couple of more services that you want to check the URL against, so you have multiple inputs of information. And also you would want to build other branches to check if the email has an attachment that it will be parsed and sent to your maybe your sandbox that we're using, your sandbox application. Submit the attachment there and fetch the report back. Also, as I said earlier, you can check the sender of the email, the headers. Also, you can plug in your tip, your threat intel platform there. Submit some indicators there. See if they are coming up any results from your threat intel resources. You maybe want to give your analyst the opportunity to block list some indicators that was found in the email. Let's say that the investigation ends up and to a malicious email. Maybe you want to flag some IOCs for monitoring. You can do that. I mean, anything really that you want, you can add it on that story.
The world is your oyster. There's a ton
exactly.
a ton of possibility here. And Johannes, you mentioned a few things that you think that people want to. I remember when we were talking about people want to do. So some of the the other things that, like, even if something's not malicious, I think you were saying things like, actually I have one or two of them written down, but things like, hey, there's a redirect to that, like the initial landing page is one URL, but another one is like or the next page is bad. Do you have one or two examples of things that you might want to search for there?
Also, there's different websites which are legitimate. So the problem is there's legitimate websites, legitimate infrastructure hosting phishing. There's legitimate infrastructure that has open redirects. I think LinkedIn has still one, right? So just because a link goes to linkedin.com doesn't mean you can just exclude it or whitelist it. You still have to investigate it. There's an increase, has been an increase over the past years, really, of multi-stage phishing, where you get a link to a legitimate file hosting service, and then there's a file or PDF on that service, and that has a link to another service, and then there's the phishing link, right? And so it's not as simple as checking one incoming URL against some static list or some static verdict, really.
Okay, perfect. And you've kind of broken my demo a little bit in a minute, where I'll talk about I didn't realize about the open redirect in LinkedIn, but I threw in LinkedIn as one of my examples of a known good URL. So I'll have to take that out in a minute. So I suppose, kind of talking about those, what I wanted to show then is a much richer version of a phishing analysis playbook. So this is like a mail that's going to be reported to here, report phishing at Tynes.xyz. So it's the same as scan.phish.ly. It's just a mailbox. And you can, by the way, read, this is using an IMAP action. You can read from O365 or G Suite, however you want. But what this is doing, it's actually like, it's doing a few different steps. So the first step it's doing is it's like checking if there's an EML attachment. So tools like your KnowBefores, or your there's a bunch like phish reporting tools or EML reporting tools. There's a lot of buttons in O365 and G Suite that you can have that will press and just send you an EML file. In Tynes, you can automate that process, so you can handle those. But the first thing you have to check is if the mail is a forward. If the mail is a forward, you probably don't need to analyze the headers. If the mail isn't a forward, you actually do want to analyze those headers and treat it a little bit differently. So in this process, what we're doing is we're just checking if there's an EML attachment. And if there is, we're going to analyze the headers. So I'll show you an example of a mail that had one of those earlier. It's just a spam mail, nothing too crazy. The next thing that you kind of need to do for all of these, and Del, you touched on this a lot earlier, is that it's not really good enough to just like look at it and then have a verdict. You should track every single thing that's happening, but you also need to like create a ticket so that you can reference it, and you can you can make proper decisions about it, and you have an audit trail of every single thing that you've taken. So what we're doing here is we're creating a ticket in Jira. I know that's used by a lot of different people. We don't really mind in Tines. Like, you can use the Hive, you can use ServiceNow, you can use whatever platform out there you want. But then we're doing all those steps, Del, that you kind of talked about earlier. And I know this is based on your phishing story that you built. So that's why it's kind of familiar. The first step over here, this is like checking for URLs, and this is very much that process that we looked at earlier. So very much just this similar process: check for URLs if they're found, etc. And what we're doing is we're just extracting the URLs, exploding them, analyzing them in URLscan. We're also going to analyze them, just checking VirusTotal, and we're going to upload the screenshots to Jira and then implode. So we talked about that process a little bit earlier, and I'll show one or two examples here. The other things we're doing here, and this is just as important when you're thinking about analyzing all of an email, like you want to analyze that sender. So here what we're doing is, this is again this sub story. I'll just open it up. It's very simple. We're going to check if it's a known good domain. So if it's sent from tines.com or box.com, regex for CEO fraud, and then get the email reputation. We're using this tool emailrep.io. That's by Sublime Security. They're a great company, and it's worth checking out. They've got a really, really nice tool that's just free called emailrep.io that allows you to analyze a bunch of different emails. And you can see here for this particular sender, Alice Tines at XYZ, they've got a load of details, like whether or not it's known good or bad, whether it's spam, whether it's disposable, etc., etc. Really, really great information. We're also then analyzing the attachments. So in this case, if there is an attachment, we'll upload it to VirusTotal, or we'll check it in VirusTotal and in hybrid analysis. You can also upload. So if you want to look at, for example, the process to upload to hybrid analysis, what it'll look like is receive the file, format it. That's just like basically making sure that it's in the right format, nothing too crazy. And then we're searching for the hash in hybrid analysis to see if it exists. The reason we do that is we don't want to waste our hybrid analysis credits. It's a little bit expensive, so we want to like check if it exists. If it does exist, we will like just straight away return the results. If it doesn't exist, we will check if we want to submit it. If we don't want to submit it, we'll just return the results. If we do, then we'll upload it, loop until it's complete, and then return the results. Again, just some nice error handling in there as well. But what we get is we kind of get a few different tickets. So what I've done is I've got a few different tickets that we can create. The first one that I'll show is just like that, an example of a phishing email from earlier. So this was I think this was an Adobe themed phishing email that I reported. So this is the kind of ticket that you can have. So this is an Adobe themed mail. Again, I just put in the link here. But it's like, yeah, pretty nice. An overall classification of malicious. And you can see that I've got a link there, Del, that you were talking, click to block this domain. I've got my headers. I haven't done any analysis on the headers because it's just a forward, but it's still useful to have. I've got my URL. I've got my final URL. So that's like those two versions in case there is a redirect. I've got URLscan telling me it's malicious. So I can actually, looks like this is pop open a new tab. So I've got this, which is brilliant. I've got my analysis date. VirusTotal also says it's malicious. I'll pop that out. So there's 7 out of 93 engines say it's malicious. And then I've got the option to block a domain. I've also got my CEO fraud results and email analysis results, as well as a screenshot. So like this is getting to the point where you've actually got a lot of information here that allows you to make a reasonably rich decision. But it's still not perfect. You still should be going to, like, if you're unsure, you should still be going to URLscan and taking a look. Or taking a look in your sandbox. I'll show you one or two more just really quickly, just to kind of show you what this this looks like. So this is an example of what you were talking about earlier, I suppose, Johannes, where this is Microsoft themed phishing, where URLscan says it's not malicious, but it clearly is redirecting to another page. That kind of tells you that it is potentially bad. And then I've also got a few examples of, for example, I think, does this one have? There's a few examples of like attachments and stuff like that that we can take a look. I'll show you one more, which is just like the headers, where if you want to analyze headers, you can do that exact same thing. So this is just an actual spam mail that I got this morning, but it wasn't marked as spam, but like DMARC, DKIM, SPF, IP, your IP location, whether or not it's known as spam. You're able to put all this information in a ticket, as well as like all of your links that have all been scanned in URLscan. So really nice kind of, you can basically create really rich tickets, I suppose. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to show you today about just talking about like phishing analysis. You can go, as kind of Dell said, a lot deeper here, and there's so much rich information available in the URLscan API. But it's all about like just, I suppose giving as much information for your analyst to make a decision as possible, so that they can reply, they can block domains, they can have all the context up front.
Thomas, if I may
please,
add something. Yeah, we can see the amount of information that is gathered in that ticket and how much time is saved for the analyst. But we shouldn't overlook the fact that the consistency that this automation brings, right, for an analyst. Because every time that you open up a phishing ticket, you know exactly what information you'll find there, and that's a great thing to have, know where to start every time, and you know what to expect.
100%. Yeah, it's impossible to underestimate that like the process when you're under pressure, when there's another incident going on, where you've got like 3 minutes to analyze something and you document something terribly or you don't follow. It's nearly impossible to get it right. So yeah, 100%. Okay, I think we can move on to our second kind of use case now. I'll close these. So this was a use case too around detecting fraud and abuse. I think Johannes, you kind of talked about this earlier, but do you want to talk a little bit about this tweet? This is a tweet that I spotted from you. Well, it's a year ago or so at this point, but it's just talking about I suppose phishing on those like popular file hosting services.
Yeah, absolutely. So what should be obvious to anyone running one of these kind of services which host some kind of user-generated content right now is that if you put any kind of user-generated content on the web, even if it's really small, even if it's just a text input, it's going to be abused left and right. It's just crazy. And people will use the legitimacy of those services to mask behind, right? Because services like Box and Dropbox, they used to host millions of legitimate documents. So a few malicious documents are not gonna really register, right? And so if you host one of these services, and it could be something as straightforward as here's a Box link, but it could also be something like here's a service which lets you build your own website or something like that, or lets you build a form like Google Forms, for example. It's going to be abused. So you need to make sure, even before you start, you need to make sure that you can evaluate all the user-generated content in a scalable way, and try to weed out as much malicious content as possible. Because otherwise, and we've seen that happen with customers with very public services, somebody's going to put you on some kind of block list at some point, and especially for smaller companies, for startups, you're going to be blocked by something like Google Safe Browsing, which is effectively a death blow, and everybody's going to be scrambling to get on top of the situation.
Absolutely, and I think this is, you mentioned it earlier, this is definitely something that you've seen.
Yeah, of course. Our teams are working hard to limit abuse on our platform, and apart from the in-house process and the steps that we follow to stop the abuse on our platform, this is URLscan is a great tool that we are using as a complementary measure against abuse, where we can look for files, for shared links for files that are pointing to our platform, and get a verdict if this is flagged as malicious or not.
So yeah, exactly. So let me share. This is so URLs can obviously have a great search functionality that allows you to search for a whole lot of different things. And we might demo the search for a particular brand later on. But this is a search for just like page.domain box.com. So you can search for, if you go to help, a whole lot of different things like domain paypal.com, page.ip, etc., etc. So I'm just searching for page.domain box.com, and these are all box URLs that people have submitted to URLscan, and you can see a few of them. So this is a buyer's guide for something. and this is something that's potentially malicious. This is an exact example of what we were talking about earlier, that somebody has hosted a malicious site on Box, and or malicious PDF in this case on Box, with a link to another phishing site. So what I want to show you is, I suppose, that how that process is. I think this is automated by the Box team so that you can detect these and take these down pretty easily. So what I've done is we've built a story that allows you to, I suppose, like, I can show you very simple hunting on URLscan, where you can get a URL by the parameter. So page.url is WP admin. So this is the exact same sort of thing. Get it, explode the scans, you duplicate the scans, retrieve the results. And when you do that, you can check if it's malicious, and then you can share it or submit it to somebody. This is, again, just getting those URLs. And I can see that this particular URL was, actually, sorry, let's explode scans. This particular URL was, let me find this URLscan. Here, this particular URL we know was malicious, which is, that's not, oh yeah, that is the right one. That's perfect. So, but what we actually want to do is we want to actually like search across those those sites that are hosted on Box. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to a different story that is, where is this? Simple hunting, malicious files hosted on a hosting site. So I'm actually searching across a few different hosting sites here because I don't want to pick on Box. This is a problem that's stored that like loads of people have, but page.domain, box.com or sharepoint.com or drive.google.com, etc., etc. And we're just doing this every hour, where we're getting all those fish, we're exploding them, we're delaying them, we're retrieving the result. But what's cool about it is when we retrieve the result, if you look at, for example, here, when you get the result, you can see there's actually a few different links in here. So this is all in the API, but here I can see there's this link to zionolukeys.com/whatever. I can actually, because they're all returned in the API, I can actually subsequently analyze those as well. So I'm doing is I'm fetching all the domains or all the scans hosted on Box, and then I'm exploding all those links. I'm checking if they're known good or known bad. There's definitely some known bad. That's fine. And then analyzing those URLs themselves. And once it returns that those URLs are malicious, I can like take an action. So again, analyzing this URL is pretty simple. Nothing too complicated. I'm just using that exact same story. So again, this is what we built earlier, this nice process. But if I look, I can go all the way down here, and this actually looks like this did work an hour ago for that, probably for that example. So I'll look at this create issue in Jira, demo 16019 times out.atlassian.net. And when I do this, you should be able to see here, we detected a new file hosted on Box with a potentially malicious link embedded. So I've got a link to Box. I've got a link to that exact URL. And this is the one that we saw just like 3 minutes ago. So bartolimonica.pdf. And then I've also got the malicious embedded link here, zionolukeys.com, or however you pronounce that, as well as the Box internal file ID and a link to, or screenshots of both. So this is the actual screenshot of that actual like end site. So really, really nice to have. And this is like all the information, I think, all the information that you would want to be able to say, actually, this site needs to be taken offline pretty much immediately. And all this is done. This is all like proper threat hunting on Box. I'm conscious we only have about 15 minutes left, so I'll probably leave this here. But Johannes, do you want to talk just really quickly about to answer that question? I think it's a good idea just to show like, hey, this is like I've searched for like WP admin or searched for like page.domainbox.com, but how you can actually hunt for malicious sites as well, like no malicious sites.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a very powerful search API, which is really kind of over-engineered, if you will. It's using Elasticsearch. It has a ton of different parameters that you can search. And I mean, there's some straightforward searches, right? Just like we saw, oh, give me every page that's hosted on box.com. And then you can qualify those searches and say, give me every page on box.com in the past 24 hours, for example. Or you could do something like give me every URL that was submitted that was linkedin.com, but where it was redirected to another domain or something like that. And then there's more powerful ones where you can search for a specific individual HTTP requests from the page. You can search for hashes of resources being downloaded. We have on our bigger plans, we have something called the structural similarity search, where we try to find pages which share a large overlap in terms of the JavaScript and images and things like that, which is working really great for identifying phishing kits. So there's a ton of ways to hunt for things, and this slide, it says for free. You can do quite a lot on URLscan.io for free. There's not a lot of features that are gated behind these paid plans. There's obviously a few features that are gated behind those, but you can get very far just by using the free tier. You can set up an account. You can do a number of private scans every day and a bunch more public scans, and you can search quite a lot. So if you think there might be something interested, I would suggest you get started that way. And if you figure out, oh, there's something I need to find or something I'm not able to see, just reach out to us, and we can explain what else is available on the bigger paid plans.
And it's all available on the website urlscan.io/pricing. You're one of the few security companies like Tynes that actually are transparent with their pricing and upfront with it. It's another reason to like doing business with URLscan. With Tynes, it's the exact same. We've got a very generous free community edition. So if you want to get started with Tynes, we give you 3 stories, 1 team, unlimited seats, so you can invite as many people as you like. There's a little bit of limited throughput. I think it's 500 story runs a day, but you could have this exact story built very, very easily and run that 500 times a day. And yeah, you can do that all for free. And together with URLscan, you can probably build a story like this completely for free in Tynes and get a ton of value out of it. I think that's pretty much everything we wanted to talk about. There's a whole load more stuff that you can go do with Tynes and URLscan. I know, Del, there's a million more things that you're automating and a whole load of smart stuff that the Box team are doing. I think the last thing we wanted to finish up on was just talking a little bit about, I suppose, what's next. So I think I know I don't want you to I don't want to put you on the spot and say, hey, what are the big product features that Box is releasing? But I know you're hiring for a lot of roles across your teams, Del.
So yeah, we are looking on expanding our capabilities on red team, incident response, product security, malware analysis. So there are a lot of vacancies open currently in the US, UK, and Poland. So if anyone interested, please check out careers.box.com for more information there. Everyone in the team are very smart people. We're working on some cool stuffs currently. We showcased a few here. Just a hint for what is coming up for us is we're trying to build an automation story that we talked about phishing emails and how we deal with them in an abuse mailbox, but what about the emails that are not reported to us? What are we doing with those? So we're trying to build an automation story, and we're trying to implement some smart filtering to give us the opportunity to see which emails might be malicious and pull those and scan them and get the ones that look the most suspicious, and have our analysts to take a look on that, like hunting for phishing, if you want, the other way around.
Nice, awesome. And yeah, like I just completely reiterate, having worked with the Box team for 2.5 years at this point, it's been incredible looking at the sophisticated stuff you're doing. So definitely a team that I'd want to join if I'm looking. Johannes, do you want to talk about some of the stuff? I know you've just released a comment API, or not a comment API, the ability to comment, but do you want to talk about some of the great stuff that you have on your roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the main themes we're going to focus on this year is really nailing down this automation use case. So making APIs, making information available that serves these automation use cases, because quite often we have a very rich API right now, which returns a lot of information, but quite often the customer really just wants one piece of information. They might just want to have a binary verdict. They might want to have some kind of score or something like that at some point in their work, in their playbook, in their stories. So we want to create these APIs which are so easy to use and so easy to understand that you can just plug them into your story at different points in the automation workflow and be good to go and don't have to work with all the API output that we currently have. So that is one thing, automation focus. The other projects we're working on, the other areas we're working in is our threat hunting capabilities, which is always on the front and center for us. We have the URLscan Pro platform. If you haven't seen that, I'd be happy to give you a demo. It's really awesome, and it's about to get a whole lot more powerful this year. We're going to build in a visual search into this Pro platform, so you can even go in and say, show me pages which look like this page, even if they don't share any infrastructure. Because at the end of the day, the big thing with phishing is you can obfuscate all you want. The website still has to look like the phishing page it's supposed to look like, which is working for us, fortunately, as kind of the defenders. The verdicts that we have, we introduced them kind of as a side project 2 years ago, and we realized how important these verdicts are for our customers. So we're currently working on making them more accurate, using some of these other things like the visual search, the visual comparison. We want to make these verdicts more accurate. We want to factor in things like community verdicts because we have a huge community and they already tell us, right? They already submit a URL and tell us this is malicious. I just wanted to submit it. So we want to actually use that information. And lastly, the last thing that's going to launch hopefully this year is kind of a hands-off service for brands that might have some kind of exposure, right? They might be being phished and impersonated quite a lot, and they just want to get some nice white glove service where they get an email, they get an alert if we think something is targeting them, and they don't have to fuss around necessarily with APIs if they don't want to.
Awesome, I absolutely love it. There's so many features there that I kind of wish I had a couple of years ago. That would have been incredible. So really looking forward to seeing some of those in action. All right, yeah. In Tines, there's a lot of different things that we're working on. I think we haven't even touched on, to be honest, the vast majority of the stuff that you can do with the platform. But we're still working on like making it simpler, making it easier. We have a lot of this year we're focusing on reducing the barrier to entry to SOAR. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible to get value out of your platform and value out of stories. So that's a much improved onboarding, as well as just tons of example stories so that you can get started as quickly as possible and get value as quickly as possible from the platform. We're also focusing on admin. So this is an area that a lot of people want to be able to like see who did what, when, and why, assign people to teams, assign people to groups, have view only mode, things like that allow people to get more value out of the platform, but more importantly have assurance that if you're inviting another team to the platform that they're not going to break what you've built and things like that. Adding a ton of reporting to the platform as well, so both reporting in terms of error handling, but also value tracking in what you're doing in the platform. So how much time did you save, how many dollars did you save, how many fish did you analyze, how many tickets did you create, things like that. And then we've got a lot of stuff on the roadmap as well, that's even like just a lot of fun to mention. So better interaction, so forms is obviously there, so the ability to interact in the middle of stories, the ability to share components of stories, things like better dashboarding as well to allow you to track some of your activity. So there's a lot of stuff that's coming down the line, and we're really excited. But it's just been it's been fun learning about what's going on in other teams and hearing people's feedback. I think that's pretty much it. Obviously, if you want to, as we said earlier, if you want to try Tines or try URLscan, there's free version, so please go ahead. But other than that, if there's any questions, we'd love to hear them.
Hi, Thomas, I have something small.
Yeah, please.
Something small to add. So I think Tines is great. I want to say something about Tines because as an engineer, Tines is basically exactly the same thing I would have wished I would have built myself, right? And there's a lot of SOAR tools available, and I don't claim to know the intricate details of all of them. But as you saw during this demonstration, there's so many use cases and so many stories for different customers, and sometimes they differ in minuscule details, right? One customer might want to get the information from this one field, and then the other customer just wants the information from this other API field. And what's great about Tines is it's because the way that it's built, you can change these things on the fly, right? There's no pre-built integration. And with other SOAR tools, you might have to go back to the vendor. You might have to go back through a really cumbersome process. And we've been through that to just get them to fetch one additional piece of information, right? And it just doesn't compare. So if you think, and I think that applies to everyone, but you should think about it, you're going to need some kind of customization at any of these points in time, in any of these stories, then I don't really see an alternative to Times, because everything else is just way too static to adjust to the reality of, hey, here's a new piece of information in this API, and based on this information and based on this regular expression that I just came up with, I want to do something else, right? And that's not something that anyone else can do, really.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And yeah, it's very much our philosophy is obviously no app integration, but also just trying to make it as easy as possible and as flexible as possible, because what Box are doing does not necessarily suit what another company, LinkedIn or something like that, is doing there too. Even if the processes are very similar, they have to be like different in one or two subtle ways as well, which is great.
And to add on that, sorry, because I think it's one of the biggest strengths of Times is the same thing applies for internal APIs, right? If you build your own APIs, you have to expect the vendor to support it as soon as possible, right?
100%. So yeah, with Times, like connecting to an internal API is the exact same as connecting to an external commercial off-the-shelf API. So it's like copy and paste a curl command. You'll be able to connect to that API. It's very, very simple. Thank you, Del. We got one or two questions here. So one question came through from Deborah at Chase. She says, so what SIM or SOAR integrations are available? I presume that's either SIM for Times or SOAR for SOAR for URLscan. For SIMs, so we've got like a ton of I suppose pre-built templates. So you don't need to build an integration. We've got a ton of pre-built templates for all your popular SIMs. So Panther, Splunk, Elastic, Logs.io, a ton of really common hunters, a ton of really common SIMs in there. And yeah, we're very flexible as to what we connect to. So yeah, if you check them all out, you can check them on the side of Times. Over here, we've got connections to a whole load of different SIMs, which is really great. Sumo Logic as well. In terms of SOAR integrations for URLscan, I think they're all on the URLscan website as well. So you can definitely check those out there. But as Del just said, so for Times we're completely agnostic as to what we're connecting to, so we don't really mind. Do I see any other questions? I think that's everything. So yeah, just thank you so much, Del. Thank you so much, Johannes. I really appreciate you coming and talking today. I had a lot of fun, and yeah, looking forward to seeing what comes over the next few weeks, months, and years in the relationship. So thank you so much for joining, and thank you everybody for coming along and listening today. Take care.